I made the crispiest fried chicken ever using science and a ton of trial and error. So if you want your fried chicken to sound like this, then this is the video for you, because I'm testing all kinds of wacky ways to get more crunch. But which method will work best? Well, let's test it. I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos on how to get the crispiest fried chicken ever. I've been watching J. Kenji Lopez Alt, Guga, and Josh Wiseman, and they've got some really great methods that I really wanted to test out. But as I watched their videos, I came up with other ideas to see if I could make an even crispier fried chicken. So the first thing that I'm testing is the best dredge to use. Flour and cornstarch is really popular, and potato starch is popular for Korean fried chicken. But what about other options like tapioca starch, vital wheat gluten, pancake batter, almond flour? So for this first test, I coated chicken thighs in flour, then one in corn flour, one in a 50-50 mixture of flour and corn flour, and one in potato starch. No liquid binder at this point. I'll add that in a later test. Then I fried them at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes until they hit at least 165 internal. The flour chicken was really crisp and kind of hard like a tortilla chip. One snappy crunch and that's it. You were through it. This is because flour has gluten in it. Gluten is a protein made up of little squiggly tiny strands, and when they're hydrated, they like to tangle up with each other and form a really gummy mess that's really stretchy. When they're heated to a high temperature though, they form a really hard crust. Think about flatbread pizza, the bottom of flatbread pizza, which is really crackery, and then you bite into it, it kind of shatters, but then it's chewy in your mouth. Or think like flour tortilla chips that you crunch through and then they're kind of chewy. That's what gluten does, and on fried chicken, it creates a really crispy exterior that is not bad, it's just not that good. The cornstarch chicken, on the other hand, was crispy like phyllo pastry or baklava or fried pork fat. It kind of has a multi-layer crisp and crunch to it. You're shattering your teeth through multiple layers of crispiness, and there's no chewiness on the back end, which is no surprise because cornstarch doesn't have gluten in it. The 50-50 flour cornstarch was similar to the flour-only chicken, not much of a change, and it was still kind of crunchy and chewy. And finally, the potato starch chicken was the crispiest and most multi-layered of all of them. It tasted like biting into a bunch of really thin potato chips stacked on each other. Definitely my favorite, so I'd recommend 100% potato starch, or you could use cornstarch in a pinch. And I would skip the flour entirely. I'm starting to form a hypothesis that gluten might be the enemy of crispiness when it comes to getting good crispiness on fried chicken. Next, I tested dry dredging in tapioca starch, which is also a gluten-free starch, then almond flour and lupin flour, again, both gluten-free, and I tried pancake batter, which has lots of flour and gluten in it, as well as baking powder and other ingredients, so I thought it might be good to try. The potato starch control was still the crispiest, followed by the tapioca starch. The almond flour and lupin flour were less crispy, but still good, so they're a viable option if you wanted to use those for whatever reason. They were just a little bit more grainy and weird in texture, and the pancake batter was similar to just pure flour dredge and suffered from the same gluten-y chewiness problem. Now, I've been pooping on gluten a little bit in this video, so to test the theory that it is the enemy of good crispiness on fried chicken, I coated some chicken in vital wheat gluten, which has way more gluten in it than just plain flour. I then fried it and compared it to some chicken fried with just potato starch, and like I suspected, the gluten chicken was much harder, like a cracker or tortilla chip. Not in a bad way, I just like the shattering crispiness of the potato starch a lot more. I just think it has a better texture. Next, I tried buttermilk as a binder. Buttermilk is often used with fried chicken recipes because it's thick and gloopy, which makes it great for holding on to lots of dry dredge, and it has an acidic tang to it, which enhances flavor. Some people say that the lower pH of buttermilk also helps tenderize the chicken. I have not tested that, but it is possible in theory. Now, the buttermilk enhanced the crispiness of all of the dredges I used, and it made the gluten-containing dredges even more chewy and crackery in texture. It made the potato starch dredge thicker, but it was just like shattering through even more layers of delicious crispiness, so buttermilk plus potato starch is definitely the way to go. I also tested leaving the chicken out for 20 minutes after dredging it, then frying it and comparing it to the chicken that's dredged and then immediately fried. The chicken that rested 20 minutes before frying was harder and chewier, probably because the gluten in the flour had more time to form bonds and get gummier and chewier. So if you're using a flour dredge, I would definitely recommend dredging it and then frying it right away. Now I got thinking, what if I fried chicken at a lower temperature of 325 to 350? Would that make it crispier? I tried it and it was way less crispy than frying it at 375, so I'm sticking with 375. What about drums versus thighs? Which ones are more crispy? I tested both and found that the thighs came out consistently crispier, maybe because the skin is thicker and has more fat underneath it. maybe due to their geometry because they're flatter. I'm not really sure, but it's interesting to know. Next, I tested double frying. Kenji recommends this because the first fry at a lower temperature dehydrates the chicken a little bit so that when you fry it a second time at a higher temperature, there's less moisture that migrates to the surface to soften up that crispy layer. I tested it out by frying some chicken at 300 degrees for 13 minutes. Then I put it in the fridge for 20 minutes to rest down in temperature. Then I fried it again at 375 degrees for 3 minutes or until it got the color that I wanted, which is a nice golden brown. Now listen to this. What I look for is the obvious differences. A lot of times I'm splitting hairs on things, but with this, it's an obvious difference. There's a clear difference. The double frying method does make chicken crispier for sure. For the next test, I experimented with things that make bubbles, namely baking powder and nitrous oxide. For the baking powder dredge, I simply mixed 2 teaspoons of baking powder per cup of potato starch. For the nitrous oxide, I filled a whipped cream charger halfway with 2 cups of buttermilk, charged it with 2 capsules of nitrous, gave it a shake, and then squirted it out into a bowl. Now we have nitrous infused buttermilk, which sounds pretty cool, but will it actually do anything? I coated 1 piece with buttermilk and potato starch, that's our control, then 1 with buttermilk and potato starch plus baking powder. Then I coated another one in nitrous buttermilk and potato starch, and then another one in nitrous buttermilk and potato starch plus baking powder. The chicken with the baking powder in the dredge browned much faster and had a nicer golden brown color, which is missing from the control chicken. So baking powder definitely makes up for the lack of browning you normally get with potato starch, and for that reason alone, I would use baking powder. But it also made the chicken crispier, and this might be because the baking powder creates bubbles when it cooks, or it could be because it raises the alkalinity of the batter, which browns and cooks it faster, or maybe it's a little bit of both. I'm not quite sure, but regardless of the reason, it does make chicken crispier. Now, the nitrous buttermilk chicken was crispier than the control, so I think it's doing something, but it wasn't as crispy as the baking powder chicken. Maybe its added crispiness is from the little bubbles in the nitrous that it creates in the buttermilk, and they bubble up during frying, but it lacks the higher pH that enhances the browning and makes the chicken cook faster, like we saw with the baking powder. I think that would be my hypothesis. So I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze to go out and get a whipped cream charger and the nitrous oxide capsules and then charge it and squeeze it into a bowl. You might as well just use baking powder. For the final experiment, I wanted to test 2 different crunch enhancers. So I coated 1 drumstick in buttermilk, then I coated it in potato starch after that. Next, I coated a drumstick in buttermilk and dredged it in flour chunkies, which I made by adding a tiny bit of water to flour and mixing it into shaggy threads, then dredged it in potato starch. Finally, I coated a drumstick in buttermilk followed by some crushed up cornflakes, then I dredged it in potato starch. I then double fried all of them, so I fried at 300 for 13 minutes, rested 20 minutes in the fridge, then 3 minutes at 375 or until I got to the color I wanted. The potato starch drumstick was extremely crispy, so the little starch balls definitely did add to the crunch. The flour chunk chicken was a little bit more crispy and had more texture, so that definitely works as well. But listen to the cornflake chicken. The cornflake chicken was the crispiest fried chicken I've ever tasted in my life. It was kind of like it was coated in little potato chips, which makes me think a good experiment might be to crunch up some potato chips and dredge some chicken in that, but that's for another day. Now, to put all this together into the ultimate fried chicken recipe, I broke down an entire chicken into friable parts, mixed some salt in with some buttermilk, and brined the chicken overnight. The next day, I dredged the chicken in crushed cornflakes, then I dredged it in potato starch and baking powder, salt, and a spice mixture. The recipe is in the description for all this, by the way. Next, I fried the chicken at 300 degrees for around 13 minutes or until it reached at least 165 degrees internal. Placed the chicken in the fridge for 20 minutes to rest down in temperature. And finally, I fried it a second time at 375 degrees until each piece got to that nice golden brown color. Crispy, crunchy, juicy, and delicious. This is definitely the crispiest fried chicken I've ever had. But if you have any ideas for how to make fried chicken even crispier or other ideas for future experiments you want to see on the channel, let me know in the comments section below. Until next time, keep experimenting and keep improving.